Hi guys, what's up? My name is David and welcome back to my channel. So, if you noticed my username, this video is going to be entirely what that whole thing is about. But before I get into the actual topic, if you didn't know me, hi, I am a student of Scandinavian Studies and I also happen to be trans. So, I combine my knowledge of Norse paganism and Viking Age history with my life, I guess. So if you're interested in any of these two topics, then feel free to keep watching and subscribe if you enjoy it. So I have been reading this book recently, which is pretty popular, so I guess some of you are probably familiar with it. It's called Entangled Life and it's about mushrooms. And you might be wondering how the hell that has anything to do with my channel. Well, I came across this passage that mentioned a queer theory of lichens. And lichens are these organisms that are plants or algae who collaborate with fungi in order to create one system of living organisms. And I'm just going to read you this passage and then say how this is relevant to what I want to say today. So it's on page 101. If anyone has this book, you can just read along with me. And the passage mentions an article about a queer theory of lichens and says its author argues that lichens are queer beings that are present ways for humans to think beyond rigid binary framework. The identity of lichens is a question rather than an answer known in advance. In turn, Spribile has found queer theory a helpful framework to apply to lichens. The human binary view has made it difficult to ask questions that aren't binary, he explained. Our structures about sexuality make it difficult to ask questions about sexuality and so on. We ask questions from the perspective of our cultural context, and this makes it extremely difficult to ask questions about complex symbiosis like lichens because we think of ourselves as autonomous individuals and find it hard to relate. So, this is interesting, right? And I was thinking that I can apply this to Norse paganism, and let me explain. So, first, we need to know what queer theory is, right? So, queer theory is a field of study that challenges existing traditional ideas about identity, sexuality, and gender roles. And while this is, of course, related to gender and sexuality, I don't think it's necessarily always only related to gender and sexuality, but all binary, rigid structures within society and culture. So, what we know about Norse paganism and a lot of other pre-Christian pagan religions is heavily influenced by the people who wrote about it. And the people who wrote about it are usually Christians who have a specific set of views about how a religion is supposed to look like. And they will be looking for elements that confirm their view of what religion is. And for example, these Christian authors, like in the case of Norse paganism, people like Adam of Bremen, who described the cult at Uppsala, he has knowledge of classical religion, which is the polytheism he is familiar with, and which is a polytheism that has a set pantheon and a set description of basically like what people should believe in. Of course, even there, in classical Greece and Rome, people also had tons of other deities that were not taken up in these official mythological stories. So even that is not as structured and rigid as people think, but Greco-Roman culture is usually used in order to compare it to other pagan religions because they're supposedly like all the same. Of course, there is a theory of a common Proto-Indo-European religion that spread out across Europe and became all those separate religions, but that doesn't mean they're all the same. That just means that they all have a lot of similar elements. They're all dependent on the culture and the environment that they're practiced in. But basically, these Christian authors who knew about classical religion went to these pagans and saw what they wanted to see. That's how it is. And where queer theory comes in is that instead of looking at how these Christians saw religion, we should look beyond the binary good and bad, the binary believing versus not believing, Christian versus heathen, and instead ask ourselves, what is believing? What is religion? What were these people doing? Can we ever know what they were doing, or will we always just know what other people assumed they were doing? So, I've recently made a video about historical accuracy when it comes to modern paganism and how much we can know from the sources available to us. And the good part, I guess, about incomplete inconsistent sources is that there is a lot of place to speculate and theoreticize. So I know that a lot of people might not be happy with proposing a queer theory of Norse paganism, but let me tell you, Norse paganism is very queer. There are stories about Thor cross dressing in order to get his hammer back and literally going on to marry a man. I mean, he ultimately doesn't, but that is kind of the point. Thor is dressed like a woman and is going off to marry a man in order to get his hammer back. And for example, Loki, which is maybe not a god, but still a trickster figure within Norse paganism, who shapeshifts into creatures of different genders. So transgressing binary norms of male and female is definitely already a thing within Norse mythology. Of course, these mythological stories are written also after the Viking Age by Christian authors, but this still means that some kind of transgressing of norms was going on, because why would they write about something that just didn't happen at all? Like, it can be fantasy, sure, but it doesn't mean there's absolutely no truth towards it. Gods and pantheons always reflect the society that believes in them, which makes modern paganism very weird, by the way, but I will probably make a whole different video about that. But, anyways, when we now think of historical pre Christian paganism, we see it from a viewpoint of people that may not be Christian themselves, but still are influenced by this Christian view because, again, most of the sources are Christian. And there are some other sources, like Arabic sources, for example, of Ibn Fadlan or Ibn al-Tartushi, but they are still coming from people of Abrahamic religions with very specific sets of beliefs. And this is also a thing when looking at paganism, is that people expect it to be very organized, very hierarchical. Am I pronouncing that correctly? I don't know, I don't care. Anyways, if there's like power structures, because that's what they expect from religion. But the thing is, unless there's some kind of proof of that, we cannot just assume that because one religion has this, then another religion should have that too. And of course, it would be logical for there to be some kind of hierarchical structures like a high priest, but that doesn't have to be the case. Like, for example, even if you look at Roman religion, sure, there were some higher officials, but a lot of religion also happened at home. There were just familiar altars where people just offered to their ancestors. And who's to say that that didn't happen in the Viking Age in Scandinavia, you know? We just have this view now that a religion is something that people have to come together to do, but you can also do religion on your own. But then again, individualism is also a very modern thing, and if people did religion, they probably did come together. But again, we cannot know. We can only speculate. Because there is some amount of proof of religious specialists existing within Old Norse religion, like people who are now being called shamans, which is also maybe not the right word to use because shamanism does not come from Norse paganism; it comes from indigenous cultures. The only place where shamanism was a thing in Europe was not within Indo-European religions, but for example, in Sami religion or Finnish religion or Siberian religion, they all come from a different peoples that migrated to Europe in different time periods and have a different culture basically. So calling that shamanism, I wouldn't say so, but it does do something similar. There could be someone who put themselves in an altered state, whether by using psychotropic psychedelic substances or just being in a trance. And there are graves with people found with stuff that cannot be explained in a functional way. And when people are found with stuff that cannot be explained in a functional way, it's always assumed to be some kind of religious stuff, either like amulets or ritual elements. But that's also just a bit of mystification of the past, because not everything has to be some kind of ancient amulet or some kind of magical stave. It can also just be a thing that we just don't know what it was used for, but maybe it was just some kind of normal object. And I know that what I'm saying right now may be like disappointing, or I know that people would like to believe that there was more out there. And trust me, I do too. I would love to know that there's something more out there, that these people were like super cool and had their big ass religious stuff that we can tend to talk about for sure, but we just don't know for sure. And that is what led me to studying this, because I want to know as much as possible. I want to be able to be as informed as I can based on the sources that we have available. But other than that, we can just theoreticize and speculate. Coming back to queer theory, people are always assumed to be cisgender and heterosexual within history. When two people are found together, two skeletons, it's just always assumed that it's a man and a woman. And when it doesn't happen, then people don't know the explanation. Like a very well known Viking Age grave of the Oseberg ship, which was found in Oseberg in Norway, contains two women. And at first, people thought that it would have to be a queen and her slave, because they thought that one was like bigger and the other one had worse bones or something like that. And also, it was believed that one was much older than the other. But when archaeological research progressed, it was actually shown that these women were of similar age and had a similar diet. So it wasn't that much of a power structure. And then people go out of their way to explain that in some kind of mystical, like, oh, she must have been like, anything but partner, basically. While for me, the obvious answer would be these two women were together. I mean, I'm not saying they were. I'm just saying that that could be a very logical explanation for two women of similar status, of similar age, to be buried together in such a pompous grave. This is actually something that I want to pursue studying, maybe even write my thesis about this, because I am so fascinated with the Oseberg ship burial. But yeah, that's just a thing that could be the case, but people just don't want to think that something like that could have possibly been the case. Even in later times, where, for example, love letters are exchanged between people of the same gender, people try to explain that those were sent in the friendly way, or it was like practicing to send it to a person of the opposite sex. Like, gay people exist. Gay people have always existed. Even before there were words for that, people have experienced same sex attraction, and people have experienced falling outside of binary structures. And we need to accept that. Of course, it's true that words like gay and queer are modern terms, but that doesn't mean that other modern terms are not used to describe historical events, so why should they not be? If someone clearly exhibits signs of not being cisgender or heterosexual, why would we not just call it for what it is? And of course, terminology changes, and that's okay, but research needs to keep up. And we cannot just go on pretending that everyone has always been straight, because it's not true. That's just not the case. And I know that a lot of people would be like angry for me at even suggesting such a thing, that these ultra stereotypical Viking age people could have been queer sometimes. They could have. They literally could have been. And, I've already made a video about what happens to some gay people before the Viking age, so don't go around commenting that I deserve to go into a bog, because I have already debunked that, thank you very much. And bogs are cool, so I don't mind being killed in that. So, but again, this is just a theory, this is just my speculation. I, as a queer person, would fully understand it if someone along the long history of humankind would also have similar feelings to mine. Of course, this is also very cultural context dependent, and you know, now we have so much more possibility to actually step out of these social norms. We are like allowed to do that, basically, even though, of course, technically we're not, because general society wouldn't want us to, but we can still be open about it. We can talk about it. We have the words for it. While, for example, back when marriage was the most important thing ever, you just, it wasn't really a choice. It wasn't a matter of identity. You didn't get to choose who you married, so you didn't have that space to experiment, to actually know who you are. because your identity was not important. It was important what role you had in society and whether you fulfilled that or not. And generally, marriage and the role within that marriage was also one of your roles in society. And it still is for some people. I'm not saying marriage is wrong and should never happen. I'm just saying that it was much more mandatory than it is now. And it was more difficult to step outside these things. But if you were of sufficient status, you could do a lot more than the average person. So again, I would say the Oseberg burial could have been lesbians. And actually, don't just take it from me. So I'm subscribed to the Patreon of the Nordic Mythology podcast, which is a great podcast that I would recommend to everyone. By the way, go listen to it, go watch it on YouTube. And there was a episode about gender roles in Viking Age society with Marianne Moen, which is like the head researcher at Oslo Museum and Oslo University. And I asked her this question about what she thought about the Oseberg burial, and she said that this idea of them being lesbians could absolutely be possible. So if an expert on that topic also says that she doesn't exclude that possibility, then I think that it should be researched more, because I tried Googling it, and even like on Google Scholar and stuff, it just doesn't come up. It just doesn't, even though it's quite a big of a deal. And the Oseberg ship burial is very important. There's, the whole Oseberg style, which is one of the seven Viking Age art styles. So it's important, and that's why I want to continue researching it, because I think more should be said. Okay, anyways, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Before you leave, I want to show you my new shirt, because it's great. It looks like this. It has the trans flag. And if you've been watching, you might think, but don't you have like exactly the same shirt already? Yes. Shh. I have one with the like rainbow flag, but then I saw this one and I had to have it. Honestly, this shirt just fits my channel and like who I am as a person perfectly, so I have it. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you're still watching, comment any plant emoji that you want. Like a tree, the leaf, whatever. Okay? Because, again, I'm only getting like 2 minutes of views, and I would like to know who is actually watching my videos until the end. So if you are, thank you very much. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Check out my other content if you'd like to, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.